Okay, hi everyone. So I'm going to show you something that I did the other day, but not all of you could make it. But a simple like starting exercise for anyone. The guitar doesn't have to really be in tune to start this exercise. But mainly, the issue with playing a guitar is that, or learning how to play a guitar, excuse me, is that it is a very tactile instrument and it can be a while before the instrument can even sound like an instrument. So it takes a bit of time to understand a lot of things on it. And a lot of times beginners get really frustrated with the guitar because they try, say, taking lessons, or they're trying out things on their own and they get a method book or something. And they're trying to learn how to read music. They're trying to learn how to keep rhythm. They're trying to learn how to play chords. They're trying to learn how to find the notes on the guitar. And they're also trying to figure out how to play the thing all at the same time, and that's just too much. You got to like break it down more. So on a piano, when I hit a key, it sounds like a piano. On the guitar, you might try to play chords and get dead notes or whatever, you know. So this is a simple exercise that you can use for the rest of your life if you want to. I still use it if I've taken a break and I'm a little bit rusty. But I'm going to tell you a couple things about it that are very specific. Specific to what you want to pay attention to, because you might see a guitar exercise like online or on YouTube, and the concept is simple. It's one finger per fret. Don't do this yet. If you have your guitar on, you don't do this yet. But the concept is simple. You start at the lowest point and you play one finger for every fret. And I'm going a little faster than you want to. And you just kind of go through and play. The problem with that is this is a horrible place for technique. It's actually the worst place for a lot of technique. One is that because you're playing the low E string, it makes sense logically, you start low and go higher, right? Problem is, you end up reaching around and bending your wrist, and that's something you do not want to get in the habit of. And if you start there, you might keep your wrist bent the whole time, even when you get to the point where you can straighten it out. And that's not a good habit to get into. It can actually injure you. So you don't want to do that. Another is that the frets are so far apart here that you end up even putting more strain on your wrist, or on your hand and on your fingers everywhere. So I find that's not a great place. And basically with any instrument, including voice, I find the best thing to do is to find a place where you're comfortable, find a place where things are easy. Because if there's a place where things seem to be easy, and you can hang on to that feeling of what it's like to play a little bit more with less effort. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean in a good way, because if you're not using a lot of effort for one thing, that means you can concentrate on something else, like your tone or timing or whatever, or listening to the people you're playing with. And if you take that feeling and you can figure out how to make that your center, or that your standard, and move it around the instrument, then you're in a better spot. So what I find is that depending on your guitar, somewhere between here and here is the best place. Somewhere in the middle there is the best place to start. On electric, usually the 9th fret, which is the dot before the 2 double dots, or the 7th fret. On acoustics, usually because acoustics have this big heel here that gets in the way. So I'll be doing the 7th fret, but if you're playing something a little bit different, you can try the 9th fret. As long as it's like somewhere just you can put your hand there and you're comfortable. Now, as far as technique goes, take your hand and just put it in your lap. Just let it be relaxed, like you're just doing nothing. And look at your wrist, and it's probably straight. Hopefully it's straight. And that's relaxed. It means you're not using any effort to put it there. And that's the best place for it to be, is just right there in the middle. Okay, you don't want to be tense or bending back and forth and holding. That's not good for you. And also will restrict your movement. So you just pick your hand up from there. Your wrist should be just at neutral. Okay? Even like this, when gravity's holding down my hand, you notice how straight my wrist is. I actually have to work to do this, to let my hand drop down. Even though gravity's right there, it's not bending too much. That's a nice neutral spot. Okay, so then I'm going to take my first finger, and as far as placement of your finger, you want to be close to the fret that you're pinning the string against, right? Not back here, but up here, because that's where the string is touching. Not on it either, but just a little bit behind it. Okay, if you play back here, you're not going to get a good tone no matter how hard you press down. See, it's not very good. But right here is the most effortless place to play. And if you're using a pick, you can use a pick, or you can just use your thumb. Okay. just one finger at a time until you get to your pinky, slowly back and forth. You're on the high E string, and the reason you don't want to be reaching over, and we're right here because the frets are at a comfortable distance, okay? And if you look at my fingers actually just kind of fall there. I'm not stretching or squeezing. They just kind of fall there. That's another test of where you want to start, okay? So, up and down. You can do two different techniques, depending on which one you want. You're going to have to do both at some point in your life, but one is you put your first finger down, you leave it down and put the second finger down. You leave those two down, you put your third finger down. Or you do one finger at a time. First finger only, lift up second finger, third finger, fourth finger. But the key is that you don't want that. You want those notes connected. Okay. So you can either leave your fingers down and then come back down. You can do all downstrokes. You're going to go a lot slower than this if you're a beginner, a lot slower. You're going to play a lot of dead notes. Stuff like that. Don't worry about it. Everyone does. Okay? Then you're going to move to the next string. And as you move from string to string, you're trying not to bend your wrist. You might have to, because sometimes just physically you have to. But the point is that we're starting in a place that we're considering our center, our standard. So when we do bend our wrist, when we get back to a point where we don't have to bend our wrist anymore, we go right back. Rather than keeping your wrist bent and then learning how to keep moving it around. That's really not good for you. So I don't understand. Sometimes you play chords, you have to bend your wrist. But as soon as you get to the point where you don't, you're used to snapping right back to that place. Really important. Okay, so say you get to all 6 strings. Okay, and then you move down. Move towards the headstock. And as you work your way back up the strings, you're going down again. And as you work your way down, you're trying to keep that wrist as straight as possible. Now, if you're a beginner, just doing 6 strings may be enough. Take a break, do another time. And, don't stress out about it. Just it's working out. You're working out. So if you're working out, you can't just like lift 1 billion pounds in one session and expect yourself to end up having a ton of muscles and getting all fit, right? You have to do a little bit every day, and part of that process is you're damaging yourself really, and then your body rebuilds and you're stronger. Same thing for your fingertips, same thing for your muscles in your hands, same thing for the way your brain starts to put together this muscle memory that you're going to be using for playing guitar. Whether it's chords or single note stuff or whatever. It's just that you're just kind of used to where it is. Now, one of the students yesterday said, how do I figure out how to get my fingers in the right spot? How do I know how to press down correctly? Well, some tips, but this is one of those things where it's like riding a bike. You can read a book about it, 100 billion books about how to ride a bike, but until you actually get on one, you're not ever going to learn how to ride one, because it's a feeling within itself, a physical feeling. So, number 1, keep your fingers bent. Don't flatten them, okay? Keep them up, okay? Don't flatten. I mean, there's times when you will have to, but try to do that. Number 2, use the very, very, very tip of your finger, okay? Don't use the flat part if possible during this exercise. Again, you use different parts for different things. It's not a hard rule. But unfortunately, that's the part of the finger that hurts the most when you're pressing it against a piece of wire. But the skin kind of toughens up again. It's going to get damaged a little bit. That's why it hurts. And then eventually the skin toughens up and it doesn't hurt anymore. Okay. Now, another is fingers bent, right? And that's already said. But another is when you're doing this exercise alone, try to keep your fingers parallel with the frets. Don't come at them like an angle. See, that's angled. Try to keep them straight up and down. And you can see I'm sort of angling every now and then, but generally I'm trying to keep them parallel, or parallel, excuse me. All right, so that's one thing to keep an eye on. The last thing that I want to really stress, I've already said again, slow down, okay? Speed comes from Yeah, sorry, I thought I stopped recording. Speed comes from accuracy, right? If you practice quickly but you're sloppy, you're just practicing being sloppy. So slow down. Just go for good tone. Remember, music, you want to sound the way you want it to sound. You need to have control. So if you go... you're not doing yourself any favors. Slow down and think about every movement. And you might get a bad note. You have to figure out, okay, well, that didn't work. What do I do with that? Okay, move it here. And eventually you'll learn that that's how your finger needs to feel against the string. Okay? So those are my tips for a quick beginning exercise. Get those fingers working, because if you get them working, then learning chords, learning melodies, all those things are going to come so much easier. All right? All right. Happy playing.